So I see that pretty much your entire corporate history is in academia. And sort of, I think you were at BYU for a really long period. So how did this happen? How did you come into academics?
So that's an interesting story. It wasn't really planned. So I did my MBA, and then I worked for Subaru, which is an automotive manufacturer. I worked for them in Indiana, right next to Purdue University. And so while I was there, I was asked by my boss to get involved with some capstone projects at the School of Engineering. So I went over there and listened to projects and gave feedback to students, and I enjoyed that. And then I was headhunted to work in for a software company. And while I was there, I was attending a conference about, because I was in the international business side of the operation. And I attended a conference on exporting software to China. And there was a professor from the Marriott School at BYU that was at the conference. She was asking me questions about my background, and we were together for a couple of days. And at the end of the conference, she asked me if I'd be interested in an administrative position at the business school. And I was having I loved my business career. I loved what I was doing. And I said, no, I really want to stick with what I'm doing in business. And she asked me a question I think was pivotal for me. She asked me what I liked about my MBA experience. And I had some really good things to share. And then she said, what would you do? What would you have this business school do differently to enhance the experience? And interestingly enough, I had 2 or 3 things that I thought, well, if the business school would have done this or this or this, I think it would have really made a difference in my MBA experience. And she said, now's your chance to come back and try and change some of those things. And I thought about that and thought about that. And that's what motivated me to apply. I spent 3 years running the International Business Center, and then a couple of years as a lead recruiter, and then 5 years as the director of the Executive MBA Program. And then from there, I moved to Purdue and the University of Missouri, and now here at Carnegie Mellon. But that's been 22 years ago. So I think for me, the driver has been, what can we do in the business school world to help make the experience even better for the students and have them have even more career and personal success when they leave? And so that's been my mantra ever since I've been in higher ed.
So, Tad, I've seen your background. You've sort of learned Spanish. I think you've spent some time learning the Japanese as well. Now, this is not what a typical corporate guy would do. And I'm assuming, so I'm not sure. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? I mean, who were you, this individual? You seem to have a lot of community service initiatives that you literally undertook right at the start, or just before even your career was sort of on the upswing. So where was this coming from?
So I grew up in a small rural town, but at the age of 19, I interrupted my college career to go do volunteer work in South America. And so I spent 2 years as a volunteer there, and hence learned Spanish, came back and was a Spanish major, and then decided I wanted to take some of those experiences into the international business world. When I finished my degree in the early 90s, I really felt like I needed another language to really succeed in the international business world. So I ended up taking a job in Japan and worked there for a couple of years, and then later went back for a couple of 2 more years. But I think my business career was really focused on the international business side. I'm fascinated by languages and cultures and differences in who we are, but we still maintain that basic human element. And that's what I love about what I do, because I get to combine education with business and the international piece. We have a really strong international component here at the MBA program. So I consider my job to be one of the best in the world, because I get to work with people from 30 different countries every day. So that enhances who I am, and hopefully we're enhancing the lives of our students from overseas. So that's been, I learn something every day from students.
So, I don't think people easily pick up learning Japanese. I mean, people could try a lot of other languages, but Japanese is not one easy language to pick up. And so was that fostered or by your company, or were you curious? How did that come up to be?
So I was actually employed by the Japanese government when I first went. So they gave us some tools to learn, but really it was learning by doing, right? I'll never forget, I'd been in Japan a couple of weeks and I'm studying how to go to the post office. So you study it and then I go to the post office and apply it. And I'll never forget the word for stamp, kite, because I learned it and then applied it. And I think that's, for me, that's the best way to learn. And so it was, you jump in, the Japanese people are amazing. The language is fascinating. And so it's actually a fun thing to study, very different than my own native culture. So it was just, it's a great segue into things from Asia. So it's been a fun journey, and it continues, right?
Right.
Every day.
You mentioned that there was this, your transition from the corporate world to the education world, sort of was led by, this lady asking you, what are the 2 or 3 things that you could change? Would you remember what those things that you had said at those times were?
Yeah, really what was top of mind was connecting what was in the classroom with career outcomes. Like, what am I learning here that's going to help me in the real world? Sometimes I think in academia, we get really steeped into the academic part, and then we forget to relay it. How is this going to work in the real world? So that was one thing for me. Experiential learning was really important. The other thing was a focus on career outcomes. What are we doing for students? How we balance the academic with the career component that we need to do. And, if you were to talk to the staff that I work with, what's the first thing I talk about is the number one focus we have is on career outcomes. Everything we should be doing should be emphasizing how that relates to the career outcomes. The other thing that's been important for me over the years too, that I've learned over the years, and there's some really interesting research that backs this up, is how key relationships are to overall career success. And so as a program, one thing we try and emphasize is how can we help engineers those kind of relationships with students, not just within their cohort, but within the general student population at the university, as well as with alumni. So there's some really interesting research there about weak ties, and LinkedIn has done some really interesting research about that's the thing that matters the most, are those weak ties that you have with your colleagues, your classmates. And so we put a lot of emphasis on how do we help students develop weak ties.
So, every educational institution faces this specific challenge where there is a purist approach for teaching. Professors want to teach cutting edge, and there is this practical reality of the students do need jobs, and maybe the institution has to do what they need to do to get them ready for the world. Your approach of focusing on these career outcomes, so how have you been able to convince faculty and administration to make that a central drive for the program that you're looking at?
So that's a great question. It's not an easy, because if you think of our tenure track system, right? If you're a professor, the currency of being a professor is research, right? If you don't research, your career is not going to go anywhere. You can be the best teacher in the world, and it might not make a difference if you don't have the right kind of research. So I think it's important for us to work with that reality. The one thing that is in our favor, and this has actually recently shifted this year, is the rankings. All deans are interested in rankings. Alumni are interested in rankings. It's like your stock price going up, right? And the largest component, even before this last year, the largest component of the rankings really focused on career outcomes. And there was a significant shift in some other rankings where that even increased. So, and I think the other thing that's really interesting that we try and communicate to our professors, that with Gen Z, there's some skepticism about the value of an education. And so we have to be more clear, more explicit about what's the value proposition of college degree, an MBA, and higher education in general. And so I think that's been our message to the faculty: is the research is very important, the teaching is very important, but at the end of the day, we have to demonstrate what our value proposition is. And a lot of that is tied to career outcomes. There's the extrinsic and the intrinsic part of a career, right? Like how much you make versus, am I enjoying what I'm doing? Is this meaningful to me? So we have to pay attention to both of those. But I think that's our message to administration and faculty, is that's how we're measured as an institution, as an organization. And we have to, every day, we have to show up and talk about what is the value proposition, which in many cases, besides the academic piece, is what are the outcomes of the students' experience when they leave.
So Tad, for any institution looking to become more career-centric, what do you advise them? Is the way for them to sort of take everybody along, the institution, the faculty, the administration? Because I feel that we're sort of in the middle of that shift happening, right? I mean, gone are the days of professors sitting in their ivory tower and dictating sort of how things work. We are sort of in the world where companies are saying that MBA is sort of losing relevancy. Maybe Tesla is coming out and saying maybe they won't hire MBAs. But I have a feeling what they're really saying is that, listen, we don't want people to come and just manage other people. We want people to get stuff done, be more hands-on. And so there is this changing world, and it looks like you're on the right side of it. But I can also understand it's not easy to take institutions which such large teams, which with decades or even centuries of existence, to move them. And I'm so pleasantly surprised that you're astutely focused on that. You're not saying it's one of those add-ons. You're saying, hey, this is important, and that's what I've told the first lady who recruited me maybe 20 years ago. So I can't imagine you going to your administration 20 years ago and saying this, because I think at that time that wouldn't have been easy. So, but it tells me a lot about you. So can you just walk us through that? If somebody had to do it now, I see them struggling now, but it looks like you were on point 20 years ago. So what are these guys missing, and what should they be doing?
Yeah, you're right on. You're spot on. So when I took over, when I first got into the executive education piece, when the dean asked me to take over that office quite a while ago, one of the first things we wanted to do is we wanted to add a career component, a career counseling component. And the reaction was, no, we don't need that because all these students already have jobs. So we shouldn't offer that. And my response was, but they're going to transition. We just look at the data about how people are changing careers more and more frequently. And if our job is to help them build successful careers with the education they have, we've got to provide that. And so it took a little bit of convincing, but our strategy really was to use research. That's the language of the faculty and the dean. And so it's like, okay, what research can we show them that supports our case? And one of it was how companies are decreasing funding for executive ed programs. The other piece of data was students are rapidly changing jobs more often. Technology is changing. Industries are growing and dying much quicker than they have in the past, which is rotating all this churn with jobs. So again, it comes back to the value proposition. If we want to remain relevant, we've got to talk about the value proposition. With all the change, we have to adapt to that. We have to help people be prepared to maybe change jobs every 2 years, if that's what the average person is doing. We have to prepare to help people advance in a changing world. And so that's even become more and more relevant today. I think our approach here is really making sure we have those conversations with every stakeholder. If you leave a stakeholder out of the equation, you're not going to be as successful. And that includes corporations. I mean, the companies that hire our students or the students who want to do startups, we have to have that conversation with them. We have to involve the faculty, the dean, the administrators, as well as the alumni who keep us grounded in what reality really should be and what the needs are. So I think we're in a pretty good setup here at Carnegie Mellon and the way the university is structured so that we can have regular conversations. Are we perfect? No. But I think that sense of rapid change is what's driving the focus on staying relevant. I mean, it used to be business schools, they would do a curriculum review every 5 years. You can't do that. With ChatGPT,
yeah,
for example, you can't do that and survive. You have to continually be evaluating your curriculum, not every 5 years. Those days are gone.
So you out-professor the professors. You basically show them the data on day one and say, listen, this is so your approach to making change happen at that time was to show them the data and say, listen, I think you've got to listen to this. Does that approach still continue for you? I mean, now you've been the assistant dean at Tepper for the last 2 years. So how are you now approaching? Now you have a significant amount of time under your belt. Wisdom on your side. And so how are you looking at your challenges in your new role?
Well, I'll say we have an amazing dean. She's originally from France, came to us from Canada. Her most recent job, she was the dean in Canada, so at McGill University. So she's a math finance, she has a math PhD. The associate dean from the Netherlands, math background. So I think they get the numbers, that they see what's important in the rankings. We meet on a regular basis. And so there's not a lot of convincing we have to do with them. Just outstanding leadership from their side, a global perspective. And so I think they really understand the value proposition that we offer here at CMU. So I would say the convincing hasn't been hard. We've been very well supported in making changes, any proposed changes. They've been supported from a budgetary standpoint because that's always an issue. So I think we have the right leadership at a really good time.
And so, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you're looking to do with the set of programs that you have at your disposal right now?
Yeah, so one thing that we really, again, going back to the career outcomes focus, one of the things we really want to do is integrate every step of the process. So when I first started, I noticed that we had some pretty strong silos. So was admissions talking to Career Center? They were, but we realized we could do even a better job of that because it's very cyclical, right? If you admit the right candidate, give them the right experience, help them build relationships, connect them with alums, at the end of the cycle, when they graduate and looking for jobs, it's much easier, but that feedback loop has to be there. So we actually, from a space perspective, we merged our Career Center and our Admissions Center. We put them together in the same space. They used to be on different floors.
Okay.
And that way, that communication happens every day. So admissions can talk about student X, and that feedback loop is happening on a continual basis. And then we're doing that with all the programs. So I meet on a regular basis with every unit head from the master's program. We're always sharing information. What are we doing with full-time that we should be implementing with the online hybrid program? We just launched the full-time MSBA, Masters of Business Analytics. How are we integrating those students? So breaking those silos down, I think, has been very, very helpful in terms of our outcomes. We hired a data guy that helps us manage all our data. And then he also not only tells us what we're doing well, but where we need to improve. And so we are using data science in terms of fixing or implementing the changes that we need to make in each one of our programs. So we're continually tweaking. I have a meeting this afternoon we meet with the data folks every week to tweak and measure what are we doing well and what do we need to focus. So it's comes back to my time living in Japan and working for a Japanese company. It's that continual improvement, right? Even if it's small, minor changes, that can lead to some pretty significant outcomes. So
Tad, I think you're understating what you're achieving here. Are you a known understater?
Well, what I have to recognize is I'm one person in a big organization. So
I've never heard of a placement and an admissions team sitting together. I mean, the fact that you were able to convince admissions that they can sit with anybody. I mean, this is surprising, and I get your complete point about feedback loops. It makes sense. Let's not delay the feedback loop till the end of the year. Right now, you have access to real time, and the fact that you extremely undersold it and understated it. So, how do we? I'm going to be far more careful in interviewing you, because you are being subtly very quiet about these things, or maybe they're very second nature to you and your firm, and even that's not a good thing. The world needs to know.
Well, to be honest, we have really good people where they need to be. So our director of MCC has been around for 20 years. Our Master's Career Center has been around for 20 years. And then we just hired a new director of admissions, J.R. McGrath. And they're both these individuals see the vision, and those two were able to work it out so that we could merge offices. And again, it's not 100% perfect yet, but it's very encouraging to see the connections that those two teams are making, and the light bulb goes on with an admissions person. It's like, oh, that's why communication skills are important, or that's why quant skills are important, because then they can see what the outcome looks like. And so we've restructured our interviewing process. We've asked our admissions folks to put on their corporate recruiting hat for part of the interview. And I think that's made a difference. We had 100% placement in our internships this last year, which was the first time we'd hit 100%. So it's starting to work. Of course, we have to work out the kinks, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
So I see that you're now, as a program, focusing a lot on technology. Now, I understand that CMU is a very tech-heavy place to be. How are you applying technology to the MBA program in a way that others are not?
Interesting. In a way that others are not. I mean, our competitors are probably doing very similar things. So I don't know I mean, and we talk to them. For the most part, we have some pretty good relationships. So our director of career services, he belongs to a contingency of 30 business schools, and they share quite a bit of information. Okay. To be honest, I mean, we use Slate. I don't know if all our competitors have a data person like we have, who is continually mining the data. I would assume they're doing something similar. I think for us, that's been a big win. We also have brought in marketing with the messaging. So we're trying to be better at predictive analytics in terms of, so we just implemented a process several months ago where we will meet with the people who are collecting the data. We'll try and predict where we're going. And then we'll work with marketing in terms of the messaging. How do we want to message what's going to happen, either positive or negative? And then we also have a strategy committee that is responsible to take that data and then adjust our strategy to where we want to go. Our dean's been very involved with that. I would assume some schools are doing something similar to what we're doing. Obviously, ChatGPT is a big thing here at Carnegie Mellon. So we just finished our orientation. There were several large sections of, how do we use ChatGPT in the classroom? The academic integrity piece has come up, and our administration has been very quick to address that and been very clear in the stance that we've taken, that we are embracing it, but with some caveats in how it's used in the classroom. We're doing a large seminar with our online hybrid students as well. In fact, we just got the invitation today that's going out. So I think we're really lucky to be in an environment like CMU where that's embraced, that's encouraged, and we have the support to maximize all those tools.
So I remember you mentioned that one of the earliest things was, real life experiences versus the part of just, sitting and learning in a business school. And now today, how do you integrate real world experiences into sort of your teaching methods to sort of bridge the gap between theory and practice for your students?
Yeah. So I think one thing, and this is a hallmark of our program, is the capstones, which is a lot of schools have them. I think one thing, as I've been in several schools, one thing I think that we do particularly well at Tepper is we connect the alumni piece with the corporate piece. So we have a person on staff who does corporate relations, and then she works very closely with our alumni office to make sure we're bringing in alumni, to make sure those capstones are relevant. And capstones are part of every program's curriculum. So that's something they'll do. We have tracks, and to participate in a track, you have to do a track-related capstone project. We do dozens, if not hundreds, of capstone projects every year. So I think that keeps it fresh. I think the thing that I appreciate is the involvement of the alumni office as well. So between corporate relations and the alumni office, we're bringing in capstone projects for individuals who are passionate about what we're doing. They usually have a CMU connection. I think that's been really, really helpful. The other thing we instituted just this last year, we did a pilot, and we're going to continue on that. A program called Lunch and Learn with an Alum, and we really invite, we want to keep this very informal, small groups. We invite alums to come in. I think we did 25 of them last semester, where we invite alums to come talk about a very specific topic of their career or their industry. And we put them in a room with 10 students. They have lunch together and a conversation about like fintech or whatever the students want to talk about, but it really brings to the student what's going on in a particular industry. It allows them to build a network with the alum, hopefully stay in contact. Who knows, it might turn into an internship or a full-time job, but it's a way for us to get more professionals to bring the current happenings or topics into the classroom with a student. So it kind of helps us win on several sectors. So that seems to be working well. We're going to expand that virtually this semester. So we'll see how it goes.
So, you're a business school, and thinking about business, how are you thinking in terms of new programs to be launched? What kind of programs that need to be launched, and sort of the evolution that you've sort of seen over the last decades. And there was this set of institutions which are launching online only programs. A lot of the higher end institutions are doing hybrid, and pretty much the best of them are saying, I think we need to go back offline because that's where we can sort of add the most value. So how are you sort of, seeing on this scale where, what's your sweet spot?
Yeah, that's interesting. So we have a traditional MBA, and then we have what we call online hybrid MBA, which is actually currently ranked #1 in the US by Financial Times. I think the thing that's unique about that program, we call it online hybrid because it is online, but students come to campus 6 times a year. So we call those access weekends, and we have students fly in from all over the country 6 times a year. So that's the most of any other program, but we really feel like that face-to-face connection with the alumni as well as with the students, the classmates, is really key to be successful. The other thing is it's the same curriculum, the same faculty, the same price, essentially. So students if they're here in Pittsburgh, they can either go online or they can come and take a class in person. They can seamlessly move back and forth between the two programs because the curriculum and faculty are all the same. I think that's been really helpful. Now, the downside to that is our online program is 3 years, probably the longest of any online program. But for us, it's very important that it be the same, the curriculum, the faculty, the number of credits required, that it be the same type of experience, even though the delivery might be a little different. So I think, and I don't know that that's going to change much. Now, we are tweaking a little bit our Access Weekend so it's more experientially based. But I think that's where we're at now. We took that model and we applied it to our Masters of Business and our Masters of Science in Business Analytics, and that's been successful. And now we've taken that and added a section of a full-time MSBA, and that one has exploded. So I think we had 800 or 900 applications for our MSBA full-time program.
Wow.
We were able to admit about 70 students, and great students. We have great representation from different sectors. So I think that will be growing for us. And I think just being associated with Carnegie Mellon is very helpful. Our MBA, our data analytics in the MBA is ranked number 2, I think, in Business Weeks. So that's been really helpful. So that will be expanded. I think number of international, well, actually the number of domestic MBA students for the full-time program is shrinking. We see a need to offer an MSM, a Master of Science in Management. Ross, Darden, Duke, they all offer something similar. So we are just launching that next year. So we'll be offering an MSM program with the option for students to come back later and get an MBA. So we're seeing the full-time online market soften a little bit, online growing, both in full-time and in MS degrees. So I don't think we're that much different in terms of how we're approaching that compared to our competitors. So
I mean, in the last couple of years, there's been a significant influx of tech professionals into the US, and a lot of Indians as well. So, and I now notice that the MS MBA is sort of growing. I see a lot of institutions going after specific niches, be it data science or AI, machine learning, or some combination thereof. And so, is this and you're already saying with 700 applications, so how do you see that space grow for you and for the industry?
Yeah, well, actually, our placement, our placement in tech was hurt this year. So there was some challenges with tech. Yeah. So our full-time placement was down slightly compared to the previous year, primarily because of tech. And so some students are a little nervous about tech, but tech's not going away. There are going to be a few ups and downs. I think in terms of what we offer, I don't think we're going to be changing things significantly. We do offer tracks and concentrations in those areas. Where the one thing our dean did that I really like is she is allowed. So if you're an MBA student at Tepper, you can take any class you want at Carnegie Mellon across the street. So I think that's really opened up some doors for our students to really explore what's going on at Carnegie Mellon, not just at Tepper, but across the university as a whole. And that's something different that I haven't seen in other schools. So we really encourage our students to take classes in other areas that might not be part of Tepper so that they can stay on the cutting edge of AI. We've worked on several projects with engineering and the computer science school, and I think that cross collaboration has been really helpful for the students. But again, there's certain basic skills that we need our students to have. I mean, that technology is really important, and that's going to change over the years. But basic human leadership, empathy, inclusive leadership, that's not going to change. And so we continually to promote that as a bedrock through our Accelerate Leadership Center. So regardless of what changes, we want to build students for a successful career over the next 20, 30, 40 years. And so we continually emphasize the technology, but also the leadership aspect through our Accelerate Leadership Center.
So coming to students, right? So what kind of qualities or skill sets do you believe are being more increasingly important for MBA graduates that you wish that they absolutely need to have to succeed in today's sort of business world?
You know, I really think it's got to be adaptability. Can they adapt to change, not only with technology, but can they lead a diverse group of people? For us, we spend a lot of time on inclusive leadership through our leadership center. Can they work with different individuals? Can they lead effectively in a changing environment? And can they adapt? And to do that, you have to have self-awareness, you have to have empathy, you have to have emotional intelligence. And so we launched a new program this year called Cultural Humility. So we wanted our students to be able to approach a problem with some humility and a respect of what other people bring to the table and to help solve those types of problems. So students did a full day of training on cultural humility, and then we'll do follow-up workshops in that area so that really they can look for solutions not only within their own group, but with other individuals or other groups they might not have considered approaching. So I think that's going to be a strong component of what we do in our inclusive leadership program going forward.
So when I'm speaking to companies, they sort of, especially, I think this happens every downturn, that they really sort of go after all of their MBA hires and say, hey, listen, I think you guys are not good. And I've seen this happen every cycle. I think every 8 years, the first, during every downturn, you see that the MBA graduates get sort of the bad rep saying that I don't think you're adding as much value. However, very interestingly, I think what's also happening is that the feedback from a lot of the companies that I've generally spoken to is that what is taught in a business school and what students expect to learn in a business school is dramatically different from once they're on the job that they need to deliver. So it's not just strategy, it's a very hands-on work. And so while they're not saying that what is being taught is wrong, what they're also hinting at is the students are not necessarily driven to get their hands dirty and to sort of figure things out. Now, this is something that I've been at least hearing for the last year or two. And when I'm sort of speaking to academicians like you, I'm also getting a sense that there is some truth to it. But nobody here is very clear as to how to address it, So we don't know if it's a cultural issue. We do not know if a business school can do anything about it. But this is a grating issue for companies. And so what are your thoughts on this?
So I've heard the same thing. So I'll hear companies say, I hired this MBA and their expectation is they want to be the CEO in 2 years, or I want to manage a whole team of 50 people in my second year. And if they don't, they're not successful. Part of that is our fault. I think we want to build up our students. We want to say, we're preparing you for these kind of leadership programs, and we do. But sometimes I think we, what's the word I'm thinking? I wouldn't say oversell, but maybe we give them the impression that they're going to and or how we temper the expectation of the student.
We got disconnected. Right. So, Tad, very interestingly, I don't think it's completely a business school challenge. I mean, this is one of those things where I have a feeling that culturally people are not willing to work as hard as they used to. And so maybe that's happening. Maybe you're sort of the TikTok generation, you have the Instagram generation, having, they imagine that they can lead a very cool lifestyle without sort of willing to put in the hard work.
Mm.
And a big sense that I see when I'm speaking to these deans in India is that, and they complain that, you know what, and they tell me, Allwin, I think these kids work 12 hours a day to get into the school, but the moment they step into the school, they're not willing to work hard. What do we do about that? Because it's not like the kid did not work hard to get in, but you know, I wish I could get them to work with that same level of intensity. And that sort of confused me because, you know, if this kid was not working hard, if this high quality applicant was not working hard, he would not be getting into some of these top schools. And so why do they take it easy once they're in there? Well, you know, no idea about that, but, you know, what are your thoughts?
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because we do, I've been doing this for 22 years and we do a student experience survey every year. And this year, for the first time, I saw comments like the curriculum is too hard, or you're asking us to do too much homework, or I need more balance. And so that's been interesting to me. And I don't know if it's a reaction of COVID. I don't know if it's just mental health stress. I think there is more emphasis on well-being. When I was doing an MBA program, no one ever talked about my mental health or my well-being. It was like, you've got, you know, 24 hours in the day, get going. So, and I think and in some ways that's a positive thing that we're talking about self-care and mental health, and we should be doing that. But I think in some ways we might've set the expectation that if things get stressful, that's not a good thing. I think our job is to try and help students understand life can be stressful. How do we help you manage that in a way that is sustainable, right? We don't want them doing things that are not sustainable. But I think the pendulum swung just a little bit in terms of, for someone to come to Carnegie Mellon and expect it's not going to be rigorous or there's going to be too much homework, I think is probably not realistic. We don't want to water down our standards. What we're demanding from students, of course, we want to have a dialogue if there's something we can do to improve the experience. But at the same time, set the expectation that this is, especially I tell students all the time, first semester, there is no balance. You're recruiting, you're doing homework, you're adjusting, and it is stressful, but it won't last forever. Just want them to be prepared for that. So I think what we have, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. What's amazing, Tad, is maybe 5 years ago, you would not have the need to have that conversation, but today we have to, right? I mean,
right.
I think, and so I think that's kind of the struggle, right? Because yes, you have to be you want to care about people's mental health. It's important. But when did this expectation that, you know, I'm going to go to a world-class school, but I'm not going to study, or neither am I. The homework is too much. I mean, when did that happen? And so I don't know if even institutions can do a U-turn around it. Because, you know, they don't want to, I don't think any of them want to come off bad saying, you know, not by saying the things that are sort of not politically correct, if you will. So right. I find that very odd because companies are getting far more critical now. They're willing to at least internally say, hey, listen, we're not going to hire MBAs. You know, they're willing to put the foot down and say, listen, I'm going to put where my, you know, they're being a little bit more, especially during a downturn. I suspect when the next tech boom, you know, takes off, maybe they won't have any of these conversations again. So, but for me, what I do feel is that, you know, it's at this point where I think there could be a genuine dilution in the level and the rigor that sort of drove some of these institutions to become the great ones they are. You know, I don't think anything sort of got built because of work-life balance.
Yeah, you're right. So I think that's our message is like, you know, the reason we're doing this for a reason. Now, there was a suggestion, could we coordinate with the professors so that they all don't have homework due on the same day or they don't have exams on the same day? We can do that, right? If there's things that we can tweak that would help the outcome, we want to do that. But I think at the same time, send the expectation, this is a rigorous program. You know, you're here to learn. Let's help you work through this, or let's provide some support. but not water down what we're doing.
Got it. So, the Tepper School emphasizes this concept of, human intelligence unlocking the power of data. Now, this sounds like it would absolutely come from CMU. I mean, they would say, hey, listen, we're gonna figure out the world's algorithms. How are you placing this in the context of an MBA?
So that's interesting. Our dean, Isabel, she uses this phrase a lot. She said, I don't want decisions to be data driven. And when she first time I heard her say this, I was a little surprised. She said, we want decisions to be human driven, data informed. And so that's been her mantra for us, is that data doesn't make decisions. Data should inform decisions, but decisions are made by humans, and they should take into account human capabilities and human frailties, but informed by data. And so I think she's really emphasized that piece of what we do. And that's one of the reasons we have an Accelerate Leadership Center, because we have a lot of smart, intelligent people that are very quantitatively oriented, but at the same time, we don't want to ignore the human element piece or the leadership piece or the empathy piece. And so that kind of helps balance, if you will. And the quant skills are still going to trump's not the right word, but they're going to be a very big part of what we do here at Carnegie Mellon. But I think our dean has brought that element of the humanness of what business is all about, and brought that to what we do with our leadership center. Has been around for 10 years, but I think it was created for that reason, so that everything wasn't quantitatively driven. There was that leadership, human aspect that was considered in management decision making.
So I'm aware of that you do a lot of work with companies as well, and as a part of integrating them in some way within the school. So what are some of the practical insights and sort of research-based approaches that you and the professors use to sort of address some of the real-world challenges that you sort of come across from these companies?
Oh, that's a really good question. Going back to the capstones, I think all our capstones are professor-led. So we're not, I've been at some schools where capstones really don't have professor involvement. Mm-hmm. I think that's a hallmark of what we do. So if a professor, in most cases, the professor will source the project, and the professor will lead the project. Now there's some support there for that, but I think it's really, really key that if a professor knows that they're going to have to source the project or the capstone, that they have relationships with individuals at companies. And I think that's motivated them to stay in touch with alums, and work on, especially as they work with tracks. So you have faculty members that are in charge of each track. They work within that scope. So maybe it's energy, for example. We have a professor that's very involved in energy and sustainability. And so he has focused on having the right contacts with those companies. And that brings, I think, a real world element, as he will go out and source the right kind of projects for the students. And then he will actually lead the project, and he is very interested, as all our faculty are, in making sure there's a good outcome for the company, because that's something we will continue to do. So that seems to perpetuate itself. But I think the key is having the faculty source the project, lead the project, and be responsible for the outcomes, which is labor intensive, right?
God, I think that's a very rare thing. I mean, I've not heard too many professors sourcing their own projects. I mean, I've heard of companies coming to the institution and offer projects, but do all the professors at Tepper source their own projects? Because that seems like a very intensive but interesting way, and maybe an appropriate way of actually getting some hands on some really good projects.
Yeah, for the MBA tracks, they do. So if you're the track lead for technology, Tim Derringer does that. He wants to be very involved, because to get into a track, you have to apply, right? And so Tim would evaluate applications from students who want to be in the technology track, and then he's going to work with former students and getting the right kind of project for his track. So generally that's the case. Now for our MSBA students, we have a faculty member that will source all the projects for all the students. So it's not track based. So it kind of depends on the program, but for our full-time MBA, that's essentially the model. And it seems to work out really well.
So in your perspective, what do you consider the hidden gem of the Tepper School of Business? Any aspect that you feel a student might not be aware of, but sort of should be acquainted with it?
You know, I mean, students tell us after they go through the program, they tell us that our Accelerate Leadership is something they knew existed, but they didn't realize the value it could add. And in fact, I just had a conversation with a student from India who was doing some data analytics for us. We hired him. He was a first year, just finishing his first year. We hired him to do some analytics for us on the center because we're really trying to tease out more research that shows the impact of the programs that we have. And he, as part of his research, he did an interview with me and he said, you know, I had no idea what the Leadership Center did until he started this project. And he goes, I'm going to be engaging with the center every day for my second year. And he knew it existed, but I don't think he really saw the value it could add until he actually started digging into the data. So I think that's a hidden gem. The other thing, we really want our students to take advantage of what's here at Carnegie Mellon as a whole. We want them to get out of the building. Now, luckily we have the Schwartz Center for Entrepreneurship right across the hall from me, which services the entire campus, and a lot of our students participate in that. But we really want our students to go over to engineering. I mean, in some circles, we're ranked #1 in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we want our students to go out there and take advantage. And so in some ways, CMU as a whole is a hidden gem. We, as an institution, I think just because we're quant focused, we might not have done as good a job as we could have in marketing ourselves, but we really encourage our students to take advantage of what's going on across campus, not just here at Tepper.
Sure.
So they have a broad-based approach, and they're also taking advantage of world-class opportunities.
So, you know, I'm sure that quite a lot of Indian students apply to your program. Do you have any specific advice in terms of the kind of students you would be looking forward to hear from for the next year?
You know, we have we implemented a system of OKRs, the Objective Key Results system that Google has used. We implemented that about a year ago. I used OKRs before in a previous job and wanted to bring it here. And we really, again, our objective comes back to the career outcomes. And so, and we set up certain key results that help us with that. And so we've really tied the admissions process to looking for people with a clear goal of what they want to do or what they think they want to do, that understand how humans work and how to develop relationships. We really want to look for those individuals that can excel in the career outcome space. And so that's really important for us. We want to start with the beginning, the end in mind with our admissions process. So students who can articulate who they are, what they want to do, and how Carnegie Mellon's going to help them is really helpful for us. And in terms of career outcomes and long-term strategies, that it's really that simple.
Got it. We're sort of coming to the close, so I have two more questions for you. One of them is, what's your vision for the continued growth and success for the Tepper MBA program?
I think maintaining our OKR structure and really focusing on what those key objectives are. And again, it'll continue to be career outcomes, recognizing that our full-time MBA program is probably going to shrink a little bit and our MS and online programs will probably grow. I think the goal for us is to maintain similar programming regardless of the format, though, so that we don't dilute any online programs. We keep them very consistent with what a full-time student would experience. I think that's our vision. Well, it's the dean's vision, and we want to align ourselves with her vision. I think being very cognizant of the student experience and making sure that we're aligned all aspects of the cycle, not only the student experience, but the coming into the program and leaving the program. We want to be very consistent in terms of a high touch approach here in the program, so we can do that. We might have 150 to 200 MBA students, which is small compared to some other schools who might have 800 to 1,000. So we really want to use that to our advantage in terms of focusing on the relationship development that are going to lead to long-term career success. So I think as long as we're doing that, we'll continue to add value and communicate that value, which will allow us to continue to exist.
So Tad, please tell me about Pittsburgh and what you would like to share about Pittsburgh with us.
So Pittsburgh, we're not New York, we're not San Francisco. And so sometimes people are like, well, I want to be on the East Coast, or I want to be on the West Coast. And we're technically not on the East Coast all the way. I will say Pittsburgh is a unique environment. And again, while we're not some of those other cities, the thing I think that's unique about Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh once was, 100 years ago, was at the epicenter of industry and technology. That changed in the 70s and 80s, but the one thing I really admire about the city of Pittsburgh is they've reinvented themselves. They've taken a model, they've faced the challenges, and they've reinvented themselves in so many ways. And I think that's kind of an analogy for how students are going to have to be in terms of industries are going to grow and die. We're going to have challenges, but how do we reinvent ourselves? And I think because of that reinvention, I think Pittsburgh offers a lot. Even if you're in our online hybrid program, you're going to come to Pittsburgh 6 times a year. And so I hope if people choose to come here and they're admitted, they really immerse themselves in the culture of Pittsburgh. Duolingo started here, speaking of learning languages, and they're just down the street. And that's an example of how Pittsburgh took technology and healthcare and really turn things around, and now is, I think, doing great things. Is everything perfect? No, but it's a great environment to be in if you want to learn how to reinvent yourself.
So before we disconnected, I'm going to tell you a very funny story. So this happened, I think it was during the last day, and sort of, I said, can we go off the record? I want to ask you about something, and we're speaking about ChatGPT, and then he says, Allwin, it's not that ChatGPT is a big problem. Sometimes students are just dumb enough to not ask ChatGPT the right questions. And then he brought out into laughter saying that, and so as I'm sort of, seeing your dean's vision, which is like part of data reimagined by humans, the catch is data doesn't mean much, you sort of, he called it garbage in, garbage out. And he said, you know what, we are not worried about ChatGPT. We are worried that dumb humans are in front of ChatGPT, and that we cannot, we would like to avoid that. And so, amidst all of the seriousness of, building an institution, I think it's once in a while, it was good to sort of take a break. And say, well, so even if you, I think, had a ChatGPT open session and say everybody could use ChatGPT to solve a problem, I'm sure, you're going to find enough mistakes.
Yeah, that's brilliantly said. Yeah, I can totally agree with that.
And Tad, with that, I'm going to sign off. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so very much for taking time off from your schedule.